Have you ever dealt with a neighbor who thinks they own your property? Well, let me tell you about Marjorie Kane, the HOA president who turned my dream home into a living nightmare. What happened next will shock you. My wife Sarah and I had been house hunting for 2 years. We weren't looking for much, just a place with some privacy, room for my woodworking hobby, and most importantly, no homeowners association breathing down our necks. When we found that beautiful 2-care lot on Oak Ridge Lane, it felt like destiny. The realtor was crystal clear. This property is not part of the HOA. You're completely independent. I remember Sarah squeezing my hand as we signed the papers. Finally, she whispered, we can build the life we've always wanted. Those first few weeks were pure bliss. I'd wake up to birdsong instead of traffic. And Sarah would have her morning coffee on the porch, watching deer graze in our backyard. I started sketching plans for my dream workshop. Nothing fancy. Just a place where I could create with my hands. But on that third Sunday, everything changed. I was outside measuring space for my workshop when I heard heels clicking on gravel. Sharp, purposeful clicks that somehow sounded ... angry. "Excuse me?" called a voice behind me. I turned to see a woman in her late 50s marching across my driveway like she owned it. Designer sunglasses, perfectly styled hair, and a clipboard clutched against her chest like armor. I'm Marjorie Kane, president of the Oak Ridge Homeowners Association, she announced, not even bothering with pleasantries. We need to discuss your compliance with community standards. My heart sank. I'm sorry, but there's been a mistake. This property isn't part of your HOA? She gave me this condescending smile that made my skin crawl. Oh, honey, that's what they all say. Trust me, I've been doing this for 15 years. Paperwork gets mixed up all the time. I went inside and grabbed my folder, yes, keep all my important documents organized. Call me paranoid, but I'd heard too many HOA horror stories. Here's my deed, I said, hand slightly shaking as I showed her the papers. See, right here, it specifically states this property is exempt from HOA governance. Marjorie barely glanced at it. She actually rolled her eyes. Sweetie, deeds can be wrong. What matters is what the community decides. And we've decided you're part of us now. My mouth went dry. That's not how property law works. We'll see about that, she said with a smirk that still haunts me. Then she turned on her heel and walked away, leaving me standing there with my stomach in knots. Sarah came out and found me staring at those papers. What was that about? She asked. Trouble, I said. Big trouble. You know that feeling when you check your mailbox and there's an envelope that just looks wrong? That's exactly what I felt a week later when I saw that. Crisp white envelope with Oak Ridge HOA in the corner. My hands were actually trembling as I opened it. Violation notice number 1. Property. My address. Violation. Unapproved mailbox design required action. Replace non-conforming black mailbox with approved white post design within 14 days or face fines. I read it 3 times. Then I started laughing, not because it was funny, but because it was so absurd. Sarah thought I was having a breakdown. They want me to change my mailbox, I told her. My perfectly normal, perfectly legal mailbox. Can they do that? She asked, her voice small and worried. That's when the reality hit me. This wasn't going away. This woman was going to make our lives miserable unless I stopped her. I called my lawyer immediately. Best $200 consultation I ever spent. You're absolutely right, he confirmed. You have zero obligation to comply, but document everything. People like this don't give up easily, so I took his advice. I wrote return to sender, not an HOA property in big red letters and mailed it back. Big mistake. Huge mistake, because that's when Marjorie Kane declared war. Next week, you won't believe what Marjorie did when she got that returned letter. She showed up at my door with backup, made threats that left my wife in tears. It escalated this situation to a level I never saw coming. Asterisk. Last week I told you about Marjorie Kane, the HOA president who claimed to own my property even though I lived outside her jurisdiction. When I sent back her violation notice, I thought that would be the end of it. I was so wrong. What happened? Next, tested my marriage, my sanity, and my faith in the American dream itself. 3 days after I mailed back that violation notice, I was working in my garage when I heard car doors slamming. Not one door, multiple doors. I stepped outside and my blood ran cold. There was Marjorie, marching up my driveway with 2 men trailing behind her like some kind of enforcement squad. "We need to talk," she announced, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. Sarah came out on the porch, and I could see her hands shaking. "What's going on?" she whispered. "Ma'am, please go inside," one of the men said to Sarah. "This is official HOA business." "Excuse me?" I stepped between them and my wife. "Who do you think you are, telling my wife what to do on our own property?" Marjorie held up another violation notice. "Since you chose to ignore our first notice, we're here to personally deliver the second one. And the third one can inform you that you now owe $250 in fines." My head was spinning. Fines for what? "Unauthorized animal fencing," she read from her clipboard. "Failure to submit architectural plans for that. Structure building. And late fees for ignoring official correspondence." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "This is insane." "You have absolutely no authority here." One of the board members, a smaller, nervous-looking man, shifted uncomfortably. "Marge, maybe?" "We should double-check the property lines, Don," she snapped at him. "We voted on this. This property affects our neighborhood values, which makes it our business." "Your vote doesn't change property law," said, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. That's when Marjorie's mask slipped completely. Her face went red. The voice got dangerous and low. "Listen to me very carefully. I've been running this community for 15 years. I know every county inspector, every city councilman, and every police officer in this district. You can play games with paperwork all you want, but I get results." Sarah gasped behind me. The threat was clear as day. "Are you threatening me?" I asked. Marjorie smiled, actually smiled. "I'm educating you about how things work around here. What happened over the next 2 weeks still makes my chest tight just thinking about it. Every single day, Marjorie would drive by our house. Sometimes twice. She'd slow down, take pictures with her phone, and just stare like she was studying us. Sarah stopped going outside alone. "I feel like I'm being watched," she told me one evening, tears in her eyes. This was supposed to be our safe space, but it got worse, much worse. I started getting phone calls at work, anonymous complaints about construction, noise, and property violations. Each call triggered a county inspection, costing me time off work and money I couldn't afford to lose. One inspector, a friendly guy named Jim, pulled me aside after his 3rd visit that month. "Between you and me," he said, "we know exactly who's making these calls. This is harassment, plain and simple. Have you considered filing a complaint?" But before I could answer, we heard a car door slam. There was Marjorie, walking up to us with that damn clipboard. "Jim, so good to see you," she called out, her voice sickeningly sweet. "I hope you're finding everything in order with Mr. She paused, pretending not to know my name even though she'd been tormenting me for weeks. Jim's face went stone cold. "Ma'am, this is the 3rd inspection this month. Unless you have legitimate safety concerns, I suggest you find a better use of taxpayer resources." Marjorie's smile faltered for just a second, but then she recovered. "Well, I suppose we'll see what future inspections reveal." After she left, Jim shook his head. "Document everything," he advised. This woman is trouble. The final straw came on a Tuesday evening. Sarah and I were having dinner on our back deck. One of the few moments of peace we'd had in weeks when we heard rustling in the woods behind our house. I grabbed a flashlight and went to investigate. What I found made my blood boil. There was Marjorie 30 feet into my property, taking pictures of my half-built workshop with her phone. "What the hell are you doing?" I shouted. She didn't even flinch. "Documenting code violations. This is clearly an unpermitted structure. You're trespassing. Get off my land now." She folded her arms and looked at me like I was a child having a tantrum. "If you have nothing to hide, you wouldn't mind a simple inspection." "I mind you being on my property without permission." That's when she said the words that still echo in my head. "Fine, if you won't cooperate, I'll let the authorities sort this out." She pulled out her phone and dialed 911 right there. On my property, she called the police on me. Friends, I want you to imagine this. You're standing in your own backyard. on property you worked years to afford. And suddenly there are flashing lights in your driveway because someone with a clipboard decided you don't deserve peace. 2 county deputies walked up, and I could see the confusion on their faces. They were expecting some kind of domestic disturbance, not a middle-aged man standing next to his workshop. "Officers, thank goodness," Marjorie exclaimed, suddenly playing the victim. "This man has been violating community standards, harassing board members, and just now he threatened me while I was conducting a lawful inspection." My heart sank to my stomach. Every word out of her mouth was a lie, but she said it with such conviction that for a moment I wondered if even I believed her. The deputies turned to me. "Sir, what's your side of this?" With shaking hands, I pulled out my folder, the same papers I'd shown her weeks ago. "Officer, this woman has been harassing my family for a month. My property isn't part of her HOA. She was trespassing, and when I asked her to leave, she called you." The senior deputy reviewed my deed and survey. He looked up at Marjorie, then back at the papers, then at Marjorie again. "Ma'am," he said slowly, "according to these county records, this gentleman is correct. His property is not within your HOA boundaries." I'll never forget the look on Marjorie's face. Pure shock, followed by rage. "That's impossible," she sputtered. "He forged those documents. He's lying." The deputy's expression hardened. "Ma'am, these are official county records. Are you suggesting the county clerk's office is involved in forgery?" But Marjorie wasn't done, not by a long shot. What she said next would haunt my family for months and nearly destroy everything we'd worked for. Asterisk. "Have you ever had someone try to destroy your life simply because you refused to bow down to their authority? Last week I told you how HOA President Marjorie Kane had the police called on me in my own backyard. But that humiliation was just the beginning of her campaign to break my family. What I'm about to tell you changed me as a person. Sometimes good people have to make hard choices. After the deputies escorted Marjorie off my property, Sarah and I thought we could finally breathe. We were so naive. The next morning I got a call at work from the county health department. Someone had filed a complaint about unsanitary animal conditions on my property, but we only have 1 dog. I told the inspector who showed up that afternoon, and she's perfectly healthy. He looked around our clean yard, saw our well-maintained dog run, and shook his head. "Sir, this complaint is completely frivolous, but I have to document everything. I'm sorry for wasting your time." The next day, fire department. Anonymous report of unsafe construction practices. Day 3, environmental services. Complaint about illegal dumping apparently. My small brush pile from clearing trees was an environmental hazard. Each inspection cost me half a day of work. Each visit brought strangers onto our property. Disrupting the peace we'd moved here to find, Sarah was at her breaking point. One evening, she sat down at our kitchen table with tears streaming down her face. "I can't live like this," she whispered. "Every day I wake up wondering what she's going to do to us next. This was supposed to be our fresh start, and instead I feel like we're under siege. My wife, my strong, incredible wife who'd supported every crazy dream I'd ever had, was breaking down because of one woman's power trip. That's when I knew. This had to stop. But Marjorie wasn't content with just harassing us with false reports. She wanted to turn the entire neighborhood against us. I found out about her campaign from Mike, a neighbor who lived on the edge of the HOA boundaries. He knocked on my door one Saturday morning looking uncomfortable. "Hey, thought you should know," he said, glancing around nervously. "Marjorie's been going door to door telling people you're some kind of criminal. She's saying you're running an illegal business, that your workshop is actually she's calling it a weapons cache." My blood ran cold. "A weapons cache?" "She's telling people you're dangerous, that you threatened her, and that's why the police came. She's got half the neighborhood scared of you." I felt sick. Not only was she lying, but she was making me sound like some kind of extremist. In today's world, that kind of accusation can destroy a person's life. "Mike," I said, "you know that's not true, right?" He nodded quickly. "Of course I know it. You're the guy who helped me fix my fence last month, but ... double quotes." He hesitated. "Some people are starting to believe her. She's very convincing." That conversation with Mike opened my eyes to something I hadn't considered. I wasn't the only one who'd had problems with Marjorie. Over the next few weeks, more neighbors started approaching me quietly, always when she wasn't around, always looking over their shoulders like they were afraid of being caught. Jenny from Oak Street. She'd fined us $500 because our mailbox post was 6 inches too far from the curb. 6 inches. Bob from Maple Lane. She forced us to repaint our house because our beige was apparently non-conforming beige. It cost us $3,000, but it was Linda, a retired accountant from Pine Circle, who gave me the information that changed everything. She knocked on my door one evening just as the sun was setting. "I probably shouldn't be doing this," she said, her voice shaking. "But what she's doing to you isn't right." She handed me a manila envelope. "I was the HOA treasurer until last year. Marjorie forced me out when I started asking questions about where our money was going. Inside that envelope were copies of bank statements, invoices, and email threads that made my hands shake as I read them. Consulting fees of $2,000 per month going to a company that didn't seem to exist. Emergency repairs that were never done. Legal expenses with no corresponding legal work." Linda's voice was barely above a whisper. "I think she's been stealing from us for years. I'll be honest with you, I'm not a confrontational person. I fix things with my hands, not with lawsuits and investigations. But sometimes life forces you to become someone you never thought you'd have to be." I called my attorney the next morning. "I want to go on the offensive," I told him. We spent the next week building a comprehensive case. Every violation notice she'd sent me, every false police report, every anonymous complaint to county offices. The pattern of harassment was undeniable, but Linda's financial documents were the nuclear option. "If these allegations are true," my attorney said, "studying the papers, we're not just talking about harassment. We're talking about embezzlement, fraud, possibly even money laundering." My hands were shaking as we prepared the cease and desist order. This wasn't just about getting her to leave me alone anymore. This was about justice for an entire community that had been living under her thumb for years. We sent 3 letters simultaneously. One to Marjorie. A cease and desist order demanding she stop all harassment, trespassing, and defamatory statements, or face legal consequences. One to the HOA board. Copies of all her violation notices to me, proving abuse of power, along with Linda's financial evidence. One to every homeowner in Oak Ridge Estates. A detailed explanation of what had been happening, along with copies of the financial irregularities. I mailed them on a Tuesday. By Friday, my phone was ringing nonstop. Is this really true? How long has this been going on? What can we do to help? The most satisfying call came from Don, one of the board members who'd come with Marjorie to intimidate me weeks earlier. "I owe you an apology," he said. "She told us you were refusing to pay legitimate fees. She never mentioned that your property wasn't even in our jurisdiction. And these financial documents? My God, what have we been part of?" The emergency HOA board meeting was scheduled for the following Wednesday. Sarah and I weren't technically allowed to attend since we weren't HOA members. But Mike invited us to wait in his backyard. We could see the community center from there. Cars started arriving at 6 o'clock. By 6:30, the parking lot was packed. We could hear raised voices even from Mike's yard. At 7:15, saw them, 3 board members walking out, shaking their heads in disgust. They'd resigned on the spot. At 8 o'clock, Don came to find us. His face was pale, and his hands were shaking. "She's gone," he said simply. "We voted her out unanimously, and we're turning everything over to the county prosecutor tomorrow." What happened next was like watching dominoes fall. The county prosecutor opened an investigation within days. Marjorie hired an expensive lawyer, but the evidence was overwhelming. Bank records showed she'd diverted over $80,000 from HOA, accounts into personal consulting companies she controlled. Money that was supposed to go to community improvements, maintenance, and reserves had been funding her lifestyle for years. Even worse, we discovered she'd been falsifying violation notices to generate fee revenue, targeting families who couldn't afford to fight back. The quiet elderly couple on Elm Street had paid $3,000 in bogus fines over 2 years rather than face her wrath. The young military family on Birch, Lane had been forced to take out a loan to pay for mandatory landscaping. That wasn't actually required by any legitimate code. She hadn't just been a bully. She'd been a predator, but the story doesn't end there. Because what Marjorie did when she realized her world was crumbling would shock even me. And I thought I'd seen the worst of her. Asterisk. For 3 weeks, I've been telling you about my battle with HOA president, Marjorie Kane, a woman who thought her clipboard made her queen of the world. Last week, we exposed her crimes and got her removed from power. But the story wasn't over. Because when cornered, desperate people do desperate things. What I'm about to tell you is the final chapter of this nightmare and proof that sometimes justice really does prevail. 3 days after Marjorie was voted out as HOA president, I was working in my garage when I heard a car pulling up fast. The engine was revving, its tires screeching slightly on the gravel. I looked up to see Marjorie's white SUV parked sideways across my driveway, blocking me in. She got out, and I barely recognized her. The perfectly styled hair was disheveled. The designer clothes were wrinkled. But her eyes. Her eyes had a wild look that made every alarm bell in my head start ringing. "You think you've won?" she called out, her voice shaking with rage. "You think you can destroy my life and just walk away?" I stepped out of the garage slowly, keeping my hands visible. Something about her demeanor told me this situation could go very wrong. It's very fast. "Marjorie, you need to leave. Now," she laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. Leave. I've put 15 years into this community. 15 years? And some nobody with a toolbox thinks he can waltz in and tear down everything I've built? You built your empire on lies and theft, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. The investigation proved that. Lies. She screamed. "Those documents are fake. You and that which Linda forged everything?" That's when Sarah came out on the porch. "Should I call the police?" she asked quietly. Marjorie spun around to face her. "Go ahead. Call them. Tell them how your husband has been threatening me for months. Tell them about his illegal weapons cache." My heart dropped. She was doubling down on the most dangerous lie of all. "Marjorie," I said, my voice deadly serious, "you need to stop talking and leave my property immediately." But she wasn't listening to reason anymore. She pulled out her phone and started recording. "I'm here to serve you with papers," she announced to her phone camera. "Legal documents proving that your property is part of our HOA and that you owe over $5,000. In fines and fees." She reached into her car and pulled out an official-looking folder. I knew it was fake before. She even handed it to me, but I played along. "These documents are forgeries, Marjorie, and making fake legal papers is a felony." She smirked at her phone camera. "We'll let the courts decide that." That fake legal document was Marjorie's final mistake. Because what she didn't know was that my security cameras had been recording everything the next morning. I took the forged papers and the video evidence straight to the county prosecutor's office. "This is serious," the prosecutor told me after reviewing everything. "Document forgery, criminal trespassing, harassment. We have enough for multiple felony charges now." But I wasn't prepared for what happened next. 2 hours after I left the prosecutor's office, Mike called me in a panic. "She's going house to house again," he said breathlessly. "But this time she's telling people you're part of some kind of militia group. She's saying you threatened to hurt her and that everyone needs to call the FBI." My blood went cold. In today's climate, accusations like that could destroy an innocent person's life, even if they're completely false. "Mike, I need you to record everything she says. Everyone needs to record her. We have to document these lies before someone believes them and does something stupid." But something beautiful happened that I never expected. The community that Marjorie thought she controlled turned against her completely. Jenny from Oak Street called me that afternoon. She came to my door spouting crazy conspiracy theories. I told her if she didn't leave my porch, I'd call the police myself. Bob from Maple Lane sent me a video of Marjorie ranting about outside agitators and property value terrorists. Her words were so unhinged that even Her few remaining supporters started backing away. But it was Linda who delivered the final blow. She had been quietly investigating the HOA finances for weeks, and what she found was even worse than we'd originally thought. It wasn't just $80,000, she told me, her voice shaking with anger. It was over $150,000 across 5 years. She stole from playground funds, emergency reserves, even the money we'd saved for road repairs. How is that possible? She was creating fake vendors, fake invoices, even fake board votes to authorize payments. Some of these families have been paying HOA fees that went straight into her pocket while their streets crumbled and their playgrounds fell apart. Friday morning. I was having coffee on my porch when I saw them, 2 unmarked police cars pulling into Marjorie's driveway across the street. I won't lie, part of me wanted to celebrate. But mostly, I just felt sad. Sad that it had come to this. Sad that one person's ego and greed had caused so much pain for so many people. They walked her out in handcuffs. She wasn't the imperious HOA president anymore. She was just a middle-aged woman who'd made terrible choices and was finally facing the consequences as they put her in the police car. She looked across the street at me. For just a moment, her mask slipped completely, and I saw something I hadn't expected. Fear. Not anger. Not defiance. Just pure, desperate fear. The charges were extensive. Grand theft, embezzlement, document forgery, criminal harassment, and making false police reports. With the evidence we'd compiled, her lawyer advised her to take a plea deal. She was sentenced to 3 years in prison and ordered to pay full restitution to the HOA and its members. But the real justice came in the weeks that followed. The new HOA board, led by decent people like Dawn and Linda, used the recovered funds to finally fix the roads, update the playgrounds, and restore the community reserves. More importantly, they implemented transparency measures that would prevent anyone from ever having that kind of unchecked power again. Property values actually went up after Marjorie was removed. Despite her dire predictions, 6 months later, I was working in my now completed workshop when Sarah called me outside. "You need to see this," she said. Pointing across the street, there it was. A bright red for sale sign planted in Marjorie's front yard. Her husband, a quiet man I'd always felt sorry for, was loading boxes into a moving truck. He caught my eye and walked over. "I owe you an apology," he said quietly. "I knew she was getting out of hand, but I never thought she could do the things they proved in court." "You don't owe me anything," I told him. "I hope you find some peace." He nodded, tears in his eyes. "She's getting the help she needs now. And I'm getting a fresh start somewhere. She can't hurt anyone else." Friends, I want to tell you something important. This story isn't really about HOAs or property rights or even justice, though all of those things matter. This story is about what happens when good people decide they've had enough. For months, I thought I was alone. I thought I was the only one standing up to Marjorie's tyranny. But the truth is, she'd been hurting people for years. The difference was that I had the resources, the stubbornness, and yes, the privilege to fight back. Not everyone does. Some of the families she victimized were young couples who couldn't afford lawyers, elderly people on fixed incomes who were afraid of conflict, military families dealing with deployments who didn't have time for legal battles. I fought back not just for my family, but for all of them. My workshop is finished now. It's everything I dreamed it would be, a place where I can create things with my hands, where Sarah can read while I work, where we can find peace at the end of long days. But more than that, it's a symbol, a reminder that in America, no matter how big someone's clipboard is, no matter how loud they yell or how many threats they make, the law still matters, property rights still matter, truth still matters. I've learned something. Important through all of this, most bullies are actually cowards. They pick on people they think won't fight back. They rely on others being too polite, too busy, or too scared to stand up to them. But when you shine a light on their behavior, when you document their lies, when you stand up not just for yourself, but for everyone they've hurt, that's when their power crumbles. Marjorie Kane thought she was untouchable because she'd gotten away with small abuses for so long. But corruption, like rust, spreads. And eventually, the whole structure collapses. If you're dealing with someone like Marjorie in your own life, whether it's an HOA bully, a workplace tyrant, or just someone who thinks their authority gives them the right to make your life miserable, remember this. You have more power than you think you do. Document everything. Know your rights. Find allies. And don't be afraid to fight for what's yours. Because at the end of the day, bullies only win when good people do nothing. And sometimes, just sometimes, the good guys really do win. Thank you for taking this journey with me. If this story helped you, or if you've got your own HOA horror story, let me know in the comments below. And remember, subscribe for more real-life stories that prove truth really is stranger than fiction. Because as long as there are, it's people with clipboards who think they rule the world. There will be stories worth telling, asterisk.